Hi, Mrs. Jensen here to talk about how you can help your child succeed in our online school. Now, as parents, and I'm a parent of 4 children myself, we want to help our child, all of our children succeed. This is part of our heart and our spirit and our minds. We not only want our child to survive, but we want them to thrive. We want what's best for them. Sometimes, though, what we want and what we do can get in their way of success. You're probably thinking, how? How is this possible? Well, let me tell you, I have a story about this. My child, Andrew, he came to this world. He's fabulous. But, well, I shouldn't say but, because I think this is one of his greatest strengths, but it can also be one of his weaknesses. So anyways, he came into this world with passion, and he came either screaming mad or very, very happy. There is no in between with this child. To this day, he is still the same. And Andrew was we had some great experiences when he was little. I learned a lot as a mother from him because of this passion and his thrill and just the life, the vitality that is coursing through him. So he went to kindergarten. Kindergarten was okay. Half a day, I pushed him out the door, said, "See ya." I had a baby still, and he was like, "Hey, he is hard. He is so hard on me all the time." Because emotionally draining children can do this sometimes. And it's not that there was anything really wrong with that, but I was ready for him to go to school. And even though I was a little leery, thinking maybe he was just a little immature for that, and maybe he could have been held back a year, but I needed him to go. So first grade comes along, and that's when everything hit the fan. First grade is the grade that you often find out that there's something else going on with a kid, where you're like, I have a hint, but when they start attending school all day long, it becomes difficult. And it's very apparent if there's a problem. He ended up being diagnosed with ADHD and some other things that were inhibiting his learning. And he struggled, and we struggled that year. It was a hard year. And whatever happened throughout that year, and I don't remember now, and that's kind of a blessing too. I don't remember why through all of this we did this, but I do know by second grade, my husband and I and Andrew decided that it would be best for him to be homeschooled because we needed something different for him, because he was bright, very intelligent. He would build things. He would pick up cardboard boxes from the time he was really little and build and create systems and machines. And he had this mind that was just not suited for the school environment that he was in. So this is how I know that the SEM model for Ascent Academy is really a good thing, because not everybody learns the same way. It's also what I was trained in when I did my Montessori training, is that every child is different, and it's beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with a child showing that they know a different way. So getting back to Andrew and my homeschooling experience, which was a mess. It was a mess. But I have some tips for you based off of that. Don't do what I did. I'm going to tell you now, if you follow these simple tips and strategies, you will have better success than I did. First one, number one, don't do all the heavy lifting. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, Andrew would get an assignment and we would bargain. I would bargain, he would bargain. What if I only did this much? And I would be like, well, if you do this much, we'll and there was bargaining, there was crying. Both of us were crying. There were tears. There was some screaming, not just by my child. And although he is the only one that threw himself on the floor. So, yay, I did it. And I used to think, and I still kind of do, most of the time, my goal in life is to just get to the end of the day and nobody else is dead. We are doing a great job. So that could be tip number 2 is when you get to the end of the day, just be happy that everyone's alive. That's tip number 2. But let's go back to tip number 1 about not doing the heavy lifting. Okay, so don't do the heavy lifting because it's their turn to learn. You learn by doing the lifting. You learn, you build muscle, and you build the muscle by doing the work. In school, for him or for any child, if you are doing all of the reading, all of the explaining, all of the talking, you're doing all the work. And it's a little bit hard in this online learning environment. I'm learning myself how I can, through Zoom, give the children more time to talk, because that's on me. And so we're working through this myself. I'm doing it now too. It's not just you. It's not just, and so don't feel like you're such a failure or anything yourself as a parent. If you fall in the same patterns that I did, it's not the end of the world, but you'll make yourself a lot happier in the end if you stop reading everything for them, unless there's really an issue, unless there's something that they really need it with. You need to let them struggle. So every single writing, every single thing that is done, if you end up feeling that you are beyond exhausted and that you're doing everything, you need to stop and breathe and then think, what can I do to be the one not doing all this heavy lifting? How can I help support them so they are doing it? They need to try to read more. And maybe you could practice, they could read every other word, or they could read all of the uhs, or that, like, if it's a writing assignment, that they tell you what they're going to write. You write that down, and then you give that paper back to them, and they're expected to still write. For math is one of those ones where, as a parent, you're going to want to explain. Now, you think, well, yeah, that's my job. I'm here. I'm home teaching. I'm at home teaching these people. When there's certain times when you shouldn't explain, and sometimes when you should. Now, I'm going to say, so my tip number 3, wait to explain until after they've had the lesson. So I will be all year long giving them a pre-test and a post-test for every math thing. Oftentimes there's other ones that I'll give a pre-test, mid-test. There's all of these tests that are going to come up. If they have not had a lesson from me about an assignment or about any of it, if they haven't had a lesson from me on it, don't try to explain it to them. Save yourself a lot of trouble by waiting to let me teach it first. And then if you notice that afterwards that they need it explained, then you can step in and help explain it to them, because sometimes they just need somebody else to talk about it with. Or sometimes if you have another child in the house, let me tell you, if you have older brother and sister, after they've had the lesson, come in and sit and they talk about the math and say, this is how I do it. And oftentimes another child will come in and all of a sudden it clicks because they speak the same language. And sometimes it happens with talking with another parent. Sometimes it happens with talking, we don't all learn things the first time that it's told to us. Sometimes it takes multiple attempts. Our brains are sponges, and we don't all absorb at the same rate. And so we'll need multiple times to hear things. So save yourself time by waiting for me to teach the lesson and then explaining. And that leads me to step number 4. The assessments are really important. I use the data, the school uses the data to track growth. Now, if I was to take and ask somebody, ask the class, if I was in a real classroom, my example would be this. So if I had a child and I said, hey, Johnny, come and measure yourself against the wall. And I put him up against the wall and I put a line right above his head. And then I say, hey, Susie, come on over. Let's measure you too. And Susie's shorter by an inch than Johnny. And so then I have her stand right in the same spot that Johnny stood. I have her stand right where Johnny stood. I have her stand right in basically the same position, and I mark her on the wall. Okay, I can see that, okay, she is shorter than Johnny by just looking at it. Now, I'm going to call over Tom, and I'm going to say, Tom, you know what? I'm going to let someone help you be bigger. All right, so I call over Tom, and I put Tom on top of Johnny's shoulders. And then they stand against the wall. And then I measure Tom up here, and Johnny's helped him get taller. I mean, so then there's like 2 feet of space. Is Tommy really that tall? No, Tommy's not. So every time on an assessment, if you help your child, that's like, hey, let's make you as tall as I am and probably some more. Don't do it. It doesn't help me, because then when I go to plan my lessons, I think that your child is significantly ahead. And even, and it's hard to say this because, again, we think that when we go and explain more than what the writing prompt is, that we're helping. But it's hard because unless the teachers need to know this raw data. We want to know exactly where your child is at that moment, and then we are expected to see growth. Well, if your child starts up where Tommy was with Johnny's help, but he's really not, and we potentially could see something going in the opposite way. We can see it's really not, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to Tommy. It's not helpful to Johnny who helped him. It's not helpful to me as a teacher, because I think that he's clear up here. And if I didn't know any better, yes, it's not as good. So that's my last tip. The assessments are really important for us to measure growth. What I suggest on that tip, just to finally sum it up, that don't explain the question to them. Ask them the question, read the directions, everything exactly like it is on the test, to teach them academic vocabulary, to also see, really, do they understand this material? This will help me and help your student, which is the most important point, and it will help yourself. It will help your student so much more if I have accurate data to measure growth. Thank you so much for everything you do. Please use these tips to make sure that you are being a better online learning coach than I was. I didn't do as well as I would now. I have more knowledge. So do your best. Stay in contact with me. Thanks. Bye.